You can join us on Twitter today with the handle @EmEnabling_Summit. Hashtags emenabling20 and hashtag emenabling_briefing. We're pleased to share some images of previous emenabling summits. The slide features our emenabling Virtual Leadership Briefing 2020 sponsors. You can find the full list of sponsors on the emenabling Summit wiki page, which you'll find in chat. One of the images on the screen that's rotating through is of Christine Lebois, who often is our musical accompanist at emenabling and chimes when it's time to come back into session rooms. We'll have to rely on a voice and chat reminders today for our summit. We appreciate your patience today. We are working with our captioning team to ensure that our captions will display for everyone. In the meantime, we're listening to some music from an IAAP CPAC certificate holder, Homer Gaines.
Just FYI, this is Deborah Rue, but there are multiple people making comments in the Q&A about caption problems. So just making sure the organizers know that.
Thank you, Deborah. This is Christopher. We're seeing those.
Thank you for your patience as we're working on our technology links today. We're sharing some images from previous emenabling summits in a rotating slideshow accompanied by music from an IAAP CPACC certificate holder, Homer Gaines. You can join us on Twitter today using the hashtags emenabling20 and emenabling_briefing. The emenabling Virtual Leadership Briefing 2020 sponsors can all be found on our wiki, which we'll post in chat momentarily. You'll have the opportunity to read more about each sponsor and find links to their web pages. Thank you for your patience. We are working with our captioning team. Please stand by. So I believe our captions are now working. I'll wait to hear from one of my colleagues with G3ICT and IAAP.
Thank you, Sam, for keeping the show going. We apologize for the delay. I believe the third-party link is working now, and I believe we'll go ahead and get started. Again, thank you for your patience.
Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, everyone. My name is Christopher Lee. I am the IAAP Managing Director. I'm also G3ICT's Chief Learning Officer. We are extremely excited having everyone here today. We have 50 countries being represented. We have 1,200 participants that will be coming in and out over the next 2 hours. I will be navigating you through the next hour and 45 minutes or so. We've got incredible speakers, some of the top-notch speakers, true rock stars around the globe that will be talking about digital accessibility innovation. They will be showing digital innovations, as well as they're going to be talking about innovation communities, smart innovation communities. So again, these are rock stars, and we are so glad to have them here with us. We are using the chat, so make sure you have the chat open and the Q&A. We will not be collecting, we'll be collecting Q&As, different questions and answers that may come in through the question and as well as the chat. And we'll be holding on to those if we have time. We'll be selecting a few of those and giving them to the moderator so they can answer them. So if we don't get to your question, we will be hosting that on our wiki, as Sam mentioned earlier. We do have an external wiki, which we will share later. We are streaming right now on YouTube. So if you're not able to access Zoom and your friend or colleague can't, then please let them know that we are on YouTube, and that link is in the chat also. So with that being said, as I said, we have 1,200 folks that registered, 50 countries. We have an array of experts on Zoom right now with us. So let's get started. I want to introduce Excel LeBlanc. Excel LeBlanc is the President and Chief Executive Officer of G3ICT. And Excel, I'm going to turn it over to you. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Christopher. It's great to reconnect with so many dear colleagues from around the world. Looking at the list of attendees, I can see so many committed members of the enabling community since our first edition almost 10 years ago. So thank you for being with us today and keeping pushing for the digital accessibility agenda. I'll be short today, given a little delay, but I wanted to give you a sense of why 2020, with all its challenges, may actually be an inflection year for the progress of digital accessibility, which is in fact why we chose the theme of this leadership briefing, a new reality for digital accessibility. I'm hearing Pat Tesler in the background, so if you can put yourself on mute, that would be super helpful. There are three impactful trends this year that all of us witness. Number one, with the COVID-19 and the shift, the massive shift to digital means and virtual services, there is obviously an unescapable imperative for our virtual world to be accessible. And that has popped up everywhere. I've never seen so many conferences, seminars, and declarations about the need for digital accessibility as I've seen this year. The second trend is that innovation and competition among leading IT vendors for the best digital accessibility features has almost never been that hot. It's incredible to see how much progress is made among the Microsoft, Google, Facebook, or other leaders, Google of the world. So that's a real interesting positive, that at the very time when we have so much difficulties, the progress in innovation are incredible. The third trend is that while this is happening and user interfaces and user devices are making great progress in accessibility, generally speaking, the accessibility of websites, digital content and services is not really followed up as fast. So the next slide actually will show you what you think of what's happening right now. We asked you the question, over the past 5 years, did you see those features being considerably or very much improved or not? And for mobile devices, digital assistant and PCs, 65% of you think that accessibility area has considerably or very much improved. While for website digital content services, only 24% of you thought that there was considerable improvement. So there is a bit of the two-speed progress in the marketplace, very high speed for devices and user interface, and relatively slow speed for website and digital content. So you certainly see that same tension in different ways. And so I will ask for the next slide and to show you that in fact, the topics you want to hear about are basically very much in line with those tensions. Number one, you want to hear about innovation that will likely transform the field of digital accessibility. This is why we have Windsurf opening up the conference today and a dedicated panel on it. You have really the best mind in the industry to talk about it today. The second topic you want to hear about is what are disability advocates thinking about the current state of digital accessibility? And the third one is what are the initiatives today to promote the digital inclusion of persons with disabilities, which is very much related to the fact that many organizations don't pay attention to it yet. And so the last question, of course, is very much the question for the second panel, which is how leading corporations deploy accessibility strategies and processes to make it happen. So with that, we have an agenda that we structured for you today, which includes 3 topics: digital accessibility innovation, leapfrogging into the future, reimagining smart inclusive communities, and then the best of 2020 digital accessibility innovations. So I hope that those topics will be exciting. You know, we have a tradition of having heated discussion and tough questions during our discussion at Enabling. So I hope that you will enjoy those today. And I will get back at the end of the seminar with some concluding remarks. Christopher, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Excel. This is Christopher Lee again. I want to open up the floor right now to Frances West, who is the founder of Frances West Co. And she's going to be talking to Windsurf, who is the VP and Chief Internet Evangelist for Google. Pretty impressive folks that we have here today. The actual title of this presentation is Digital Accessibility Innovation, Leapfrogging into the Future. So this is an interview. Frances, I'm going to give the floor to you. Frances, you on mute. If you want to unmute yourself, we have to do that during one Zoom call. There's no doubt about it.
I know, this is great. Okay, here we go again. Well, thank you very much for this opportunity to interview Windsurf. And of course, I'm not going to give any introduction about Windsurf because this is a man deserves no introduction is needed, except, you know, one phrase that he's the father of the internet. As I was preparing for this interview, I actually kind of went back to the history of the internet a little bit. And I do want to share that then when we met, you kind of met me in the capacity as IBM's Chief Accessibility Officer, and so, but I don't know whether you know that back in the old days, in the 1984 timeframe, I was a young systems engineer, actually was responsible for supporting the BBN computers.
No kidding.
And then I became actually a regional manager of the RS6000, which is an IBM customized hardware supporting internet based
right.
on the work that was done by MCI, IBM, I think University of Michigan. So I would say that we actually have a connection long before the accessibility, and it's coming a full circle for me to be here to interview today. It was just incredibly, it's just mind-boggling. So as I was going through the history of the internet, and you thought about it really was a combination of working with the government, NSF, and then private sectors, and then research institutions like BBNN. And then, so the first question actually too is that as you invented the internet and saw the power of all this collaboration, and how do you feel like the internet's impact, on this field of accessibility, which of course we know it's all about people and it's all about collaboration. So we'd love to hear your perspective from back then to now in the context of digital inclusion.
Well, thanks so much for having me on the program, Francis. And I did not know that you worked on at IBM and BBNN. I knew you were at IBM, and I didn't know you worked on the RS6000s, which were the IBM instance of routers. That
right.
Was
before Cisco and all that, right?
That's right. Before Cisco, ANS was one of the organizations that put all that stuff together for the NSFnet backbone. Well, anyway, let me come back to internet. Remember that its predecessor, the ARPANET, was intended to allow for computer-based collaboration among a collection of universities that were doing research in artificial intelligence and computer science. And so the initiative and the incentive had to do with collaboration and sharing of results, sharing of computing capacity, sharing of software development, and things like that. The internet was developed on the strength of the success of the ARPANET, but it was aimed in the direction of supporting military command and control, which from my point of view and Bob Kahn's point of view, the two of us who did the original design work, required video and data and text exchanges to form a basis for command and control. And in order to make that work, we had to put computers in ships at sea, computers in mobile vehicles, computers in aircraft. And the original ARPANET was designed with dedicated telephone lines connecting the packet switches to each other. So we needed radio and satellite in order to accommodate that requirement. But once again, the implementation of the internet and its evolution and implementation was done in the research community. And the research community was all about sharing of information, sharing of results in order to advance the state of the art as quickly as possible. So the collaboration and sharing is a theme that immediately highlights the challenges that people with various disabilities are going to have. And to be quite honest with you, I don't think that we focused very much on that at all. We were very much focused on just trying to get the basic system to work. But with the arrival of the World Wide Web in 1991, and especially its appearance in the form of Netscape Communications browsers and servers, the graphical interfaces, and the arrival of commercial internet services around 1989, we suddenly have a much larger population of potential users, including a significant fraction of people who need assistance in coping with disabilities. So I think a same kind of collaborative, I would say, what do I want to, the spirit of collaboration that led to the internet's evolution and eventual propagation into the general public ought to inform the efforts of making accessibility much, much more visible as a goal than it has been. Unfortunately, a lot of people see accessibility as something for a small group of people. Well, small, well, let's talk about that. There are 1 billion people on the planet that have disabilities of one kind or another. And people often repeat that in order to argue there are a lot of people who could use some help. And I would like to submit that, in fact, the numbers are much bigger for 2 reasons. First of all, every time you help someone get access to these online resources, which everyone else is using, you help not only the people with disabilities, but everybody who depends on those people, everybody who wants to interact with them, friends, family, colleagues, are all benefited by bringing that cohort of people who need assistive technology into the collaborative environment. So I think that we need to restate what the incentives are for investing in accessibility techniques. The second thing I'd like to argue is that we need to move from accessibility to usability. And here we can invoke a much larger cohort of people who would benefit from more intuitive interfaces that would help not only people who have specific disabilities, but people who would frankly just like systems to be easier to use. And that includes simple things like high contrast and simple fonts and things of that kind that frankly will help people as they get older, including me, and many others who might have a temporary condition that needs assistance. So think of someone who breaks a hand or has arthritis or breaks a leg and has to be in a wheelchair for some weeks. They experience the same thing that people with permanent disabilities have, but they only experience it for an ephemeral period of time. And yet when they do experience that, they suddenly become a lot more sympathetic to people who would like assistance. So at this stage of the game, I think we need to turn up the dialogue on the utility of investing in assistive technology. And second, we have to work really, really hard to gain more insight into what makes for an accessible service. And I'm sure you've got a bunch of other questions, and I didn't mean to just go on, but I have some ideas to share about how we can make further progress on making things more accessible than they seem to be today.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree that the way I look at it, I mean, for in the first phase of computerization, it's really about system kind of optimization. But now the computer or the technology is in everybody's hands. So it's in the human kind of optimization. So when you start talking about human, a lot of the inherent accessibility, it becomes obvious. So this usability concept is actually very, it should be very, very, again, intuitive. And I know last time when we talked, and also I know recently Greg Vanderheiden actually was on Deborah Ru's a show talking about the technology, the personal preference kind of a concept that can bring with the individual to everywhere. So could you just share a little bit of your kind of a perspective on that kind of a technology in the context of today and perhaps even in the future?
So thanks so much for mentioning Greg, because Greg's ideas, I think, I resonate very strongly with. Greg basically says, look, if you have finally figured out a configuration for your computer that gives you the accessibility you need, and you have to move to another computer for some reason, it would be nice if you could take with you the configuration information that would allow any computer to be configured to serve your needs. And so his idea is to standardize what that configuration interface looks like, allow you to express what configurations and controls are needed. And there could be hundreds of different knobs and switches that might be required in order to meet your needs. And then store that away in a universally accessible place so that when you end up in front of another laptop or a desktop or a tablet or anything, you can download that configuration information and have it instantiated on that particular platform. Now that, if in fact it has turned out to be sufficient to do the configuration to meet your needs, then we're sort of done. However, there are some other little problems, because no matter how well you configure things, it requires, the success of that configuration requires that the servers deliver to a browser that which the browser needs in order to use its configuration to make things accessible. And whether that means producing captions for any audio, or doing audio or audible descriptions of what you're seeing on the display, or changes to the fonts in order to improve visibility, or expansion of the screen in order to magnify if need. All of those things require cooperation from the websites that are producing the content. And so now we get into this interesting question of, how do we teach people and provide them with tools that allow websites to be more cooperative with regard to Vanderheiden's idea, so that the result of the two together produces the accessibility that we're looking for. And let me set this aside for just a second, because that's the technical observation. We still need tools that will allow web creators, website creators, and application creators to produce accessible applications. We need tools to make it easy to do that, in the same way that we went from handcrafting HTML to building software that made it easy to create web pages. So you didn't have to worry about a lot of the details. We still are some distance away from being able to do that for accessibility purposes. But I also want to argue that usability could be a big incentive for any company that is producing web pages and applications based on web pages, to serve the population that they are trying to address. If you think for just a moment about the fact that the internet is global in scope, then you realize that it's in a position to serve some 7 billion people if they had access to it. And you and I both know that our numbers are not anywhere close to 7 billion right now. The best estimates are about 54 or so percent of the world's population does have access to the internet. And an increasing number of them have access through their mobiles, which you mentioned earlier. And the mobiles create a really interesting technical opportunity, because there's increasing computing power in those mobiles. There's a term that I know you know called edge computing, where
Right.
you've got people with their mobiles or their laptops, and you've got the servers in the cloud. And now we have computers that are between the users and the cloud that may be doing additional, bringing additional functionality close to the user, which means low latency. And latency is a killer when it comes, for example, to captioning. You need to have very low latency. So the ideal situation is that the captioning, for example, is being done as locally as possible. At Google, we have an application for mobiles that we call Live Transcribe, which takes sound in and produces text right there in the mobile. At the moment, that requires that the mobile reach out to the cloud in order to get additional computational help to produce the captions or the transcription. But we are working very hard to move all of that functionality into the mobile itself. And of course, in theory, you should be able to do that with a laptop, which typically has more horsepower than a mobile does. So it feels to me, I don't know about you, but it feels to me like we have, the pieces are starting to fall into place to let us bring all those parts together to create a much more accessible environment. But I will say that we certainly have hard work to do in order to get standards in place, in order to build tools that make things more, that can help us make things more accessible. We need a lot of collaboration in order to bring the various parties together to achieve a result. Last point is to create incentives for the creators of web-based applications to want to make things more accessible. And it's organizations like G3 ICT and conferences like this and the people who are participating who can help us create that incentive so that we can make some progress.
Thank you, Ms.
Well,
Francis. We've got about just a little bit more time, so maybe one more short question.
sure. A short question. This is what is your view about the what technology that's viewed as emerging technology, whether it's artificial intelligence, with the VR or XR, of this slew of a technology? Which one you think are most potentially have a highest impact in the overall accessibility area?
Well, probably the most important one is machine learning. And we see several dimensions of that. The live transcribe application that I described earlier depends very heavily on machine learning in order to do the correct recognition of speech. The same technology can be applied to translation from one language to another. We do this for 100 different languages, admittedly in varying qualities depending on the pairs of languages that are involved. And so at some point, I hope we'll be able to allow people who are hearing, for example, English, but would prefer to see German, will be able to translate that. And the second area, which is much less clear at this point, would be image recognition, image description. And there's a lot of work going on to try to recognize what is going on in an image and then describe that using machine learning tools. If we get to the point where that's reliable enough, then we can do some automatic audio description of what is in a field of view. But I would say that's a distant objective, not one which we can immediately assure we will succeed at. But those are two areas where machine learning can make a big difference.
Well, thank you, Vin. I can't believe we actually squeezed in like a couple of critical, most interesting questions from the audience. So at this point, I'm going to turn it back to Christopher, and so we can, go to the next section. Thank you, Vin.
Thank you, Francis. Thank you, Vin. That was excellent. It's crazy how much information you were able to get in that short amount of time. So again, thank you very much. It is my pleasure to introduce our next interview. Remaining smart, inclusive, reimagining smart, inclusive communities. We've got Deborah Rue, who's the CEO of Rue Global Impact, and Caroline Casey, the founder and creator of the Valuable 500. So Deborah, I will turn it over to you. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. And I'm glad the captions are working now. I know it was very stressful for the participants that needed it. So there were some technology problems in the background. So I'm glad it's finally working. So thank you. And I think we all, if you know Caroline, we all love it. Caroline, Dr. Caroline Casey, she's making such an impact in the world, and she is the founder and the creator of the Valuable 500. So Caroline, welcome so much to Enabling.
Thank you so much for having me. Generally, you can't keep me quiet and I'm on mute. Thank you. I really appreciate being here. And while I am no expert on digital accessibility and that agenda, I am incredibly passionate, to Vin's point, about creating the incentive for this among the world's most influential CEOs in their business. So I love, Vin, what you were saying about collaboration. Absolutely, so important.
I agree. And I think Vin and Francis did a wonderful job of, talking about where we've come and where we're going. It's very exciting. So Caroline, tell us about the Valuable 500. Why did you create it? Why is it important? And where are you right now with the Valuable 500?
Well, this session is about reimagining what smart and inclusive communities are. And in reality, what I am passionate about, we cannot have full human inclusion in society if we do not have inclusive business. And disability traditionally in the past has remained very much on the edges of business and been framed only in terms of charity. And that is not empowering, and that is not about releasing the potential of over 15% of our population. And I am obsessed with the fact, though, being in the space of disability business inclusion for 20 years, not seeing the accelerated change. And I was like, what was missing? And we often quote John Amachi's "Leaders make choices and choices create cultures." So we thought, well, what it would be like if we could get the attention and intention of 500 of the world's most prominent and influential CEOs and their brands to put disability on their leadership agenda and be accountable for integrating it across their supply chain. And that is to fully strategically integrate it, and the leader is responsible. So that is what the Valuable 500 is, based on the principle, the multiplier effect of a critical mass. What could we do? Accountability and honorable intention and commitment. What could we do? And to Vin's point, this is about collaboration and human beings and people. So how can we incentivize that change so that we could drive the system change? That is why we set it up.
And we really needed it. So we really applaud everything that you've done. So the Valuable 500 was started at the World Economic Forum with global leaders like Paul Pullman, formerly the CEO of Unilever. But we've seen a lot of other leadership from CEOs, Sir Richard Branson, Satya Nadella, and a lot of others. So I know, how many do we have right now? You're at 300 and...
Well, as of yesterday, we're at 313, and that represents just under 4 trillion in revenue, about 12 million employees, 29 countries, and 46 sectors. So that's a power of influence that we can use effectively together to make the change happen. But I do want to say something. We may have launched the Valuable 500 in Davos in 2019, but it has been a movement in action. So many of these people's names here on the screen, so many of the people have been working in this space for a very long time. We were no one-hit wonder. There was a lot of failures and remortgaging of houses to make this happen, and a lot of learning. I mean, I met Frances West in 2007. I used to, girl crush on you for so long, Deb. So we've been in this space for a long time. We just saw that there was an opportunity to really engage that critical leadership required to accelerate the change.
I agree. And I just am very excited that I think 313 is Verizon and Larry Goldberg is here. So I want to see more US companies join. And so maybe they're not 13, but they did join. Yay.
So well, we haven't announced it yet. So you've just, which is, well, it's, what, I'm super proud, but could we all maybe not say it too loudly? Yes, it was a really big deal, and it's global. And can I also say, we are, this is a global movement, which is transitioning from a campaign, which we were only here for originally, into creating a capability structure around the globe. Because I do not underestimate the fact that we've had representation for nearly every country that we can imagine. And that's the exciting bit. That's the exciting bit.
I agree. And it's exciting seeing these corporations step up, but we do definitely want to see more US global organizations join as well.
And we will, with all of your help, we will.
Yes, yes. So how has the COVID-19 impacted the efforts that you're doing with the CEOs?
Well, I think Axel said it so well at the beginning. Look, we know there's the shadow on the light side of the experience of people with disabilities throughout this pandemic, of which I am one as well. The shadow side is that this community has been somewhat still overlooked in what it needs. And I think this is the point about our value to society. But on the other side is that we have all understood what it is like to be isolated or to have our freedom taken away from us. But we've also experienced, particularly in the power of technology, which has been like to help us to have a voice at that table. And so where we've seen businesses before say, oh, disability business inclusion, we're not going to focus on that because it's too costly, it's too timely, it's too complex. And then we look at what's happened in COVID, and we've seen that system change when it wanted to, when the intention was there. And so now we look to business and go, no more excuses. This system can change, and you've proved it, and it can do it with an agility mindset. And as we're going through COVID, we went to Davos this year with 240 companies. We're now at 313. That is a statement that leadership knows in business, as it recovers, it must be inclusive of everyone. No leader, no CEO could possibly consider to leave a market of 8 trillion on the table or not allow people to engage with their products and services. That would be absolute insanity. And I think also they're hearing the voice of the next generation whose tolerance for a la carte inclusion is just zero. So it's about brand and innovation and growth and talent and risk management. That's what we're seeing.
So speaking of that, I know that the Valuable 500 did a commercial called Diversish, and it actually won a Lions Cans Award. So tell us about the commercial.
Well, I think I'm going to go back again to Vin. Vin, I have so many things that you said. Is the issue of accessibility and inclusion is not in parcel sizes to small agendas. We are the human race. This is about usability and inclusion for all of us. And so when we made the Diversish film, it was a sort of satirical shout out to the diversity and inclusion industry and corporate agendas, where all of the scenarios were true and real, where we've often have to sit and say, this year we're focusing on gender, and next year we're going to focus on ice caps. And what we're basically saying is that is a delusion. When we're talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion in our corporate world, which must be reflective of the society we operate in, you cannot have pick and mix a la carte inclusion. I know intersectionality is a word we're using all at the moment, but that's about the multiple facet labels that we are. And I do not accept that if you're going to leave 15% of the global population out of the inclusion agenda, that any company could claim that they are passionate or committed to inclusion. That is not okay.
Well said. Well said. Well, I know we're going to move on to the panel, and Caroline, you stay with us. And
well, yes, because I guess my thing, Deb, was to say, here's me taking a big vision, but can I say this is not just a vision, there is huge action happening. And I'm really interested to hear, because there's many people on here that what I'm talking about is real. So what's happening on the ground? What's happening in the business and the corporates that we can share and collaborate and scale?
Well said, and that transitions nicely. Go ahead, Chris.
That was great. That was so interesting. I have kind of I want to get your feedback on some research that G3ICT has been involved in, and there was something that came out of this research that really fits nicely to what we've been talking about before we move on to the discussion. So I'm just going to share my screen, and I'm going to jump into some of the findings that we found in this research. So 92 of today's attendees believe that the high dependency on virtual platforms and digital services during COVID-19 is an opportunity to further promote digital accessibility among C-level executives. Thoughts, Caroline? Thoughts, Deborah, on that? Pretty interesting, isn't it?
Well, I mean, I'm the optimist and I'm the troublemaker. I'm going to just align a little piece of research. When I saw this, this to me is something to work off positive. This is incredibly positive. The piece of research we did for the Valuable 500, and this terrifies me, that in 2019, 54% of our global boards of companies, of businesses, had never had a conversation about disability.
Wow.
So when you see this, I'm like, yes, game on.
Yeah. Deborah,
and I also agree. I also agree, because I think what we're finding is when everybody went home to stay safe, I think society started understanding what we've been saying all along. Can we please be included? I mean, even as we watched the captioning problems today, which was a server issue, but it's hard to see other participants not being able to have the same, access that we have. And so, things happen and we fixed it, but at least we were on top of it. And often it's just not even considered. So I think we're learning a lot. And we have a time to really think about resetting what society really should look like for humans, but also for our planet and all the inhabitants. So
can I close? Could I close with one thing that I've been hearing a lot about? We talk about the right for the freedom of speech. And I have been very aware throughout this COVID pandemic, well, what about the freedom to hear? And I am really struck on the many of the conferences that I have been engaged with, that I'm hearing the excuses still about providing captioning or interpretation. And I can't believe that we're still here. So I believe this is the opportunity to ensure that that is no longer acceptable.
I agree. And I've been asked to be on Zoom calls where they won't provide caption, and I've refused to do it. So I think as leaders that we all need to stand up and say, if you're not making it captioned and transcribed, then I'm not going to participate. So I think as leaders, we can help with that as well. And I know you're doing that. You're totally committed at the Valuable 500. But Caroline's going to stay with us, and we're going to move on to a very impressive panel. And we have Susan Montgomery from AT&T, Karen Tamley, Kyle, I hope I don't mess up your last name, Shamut, which I probably did, from Harvard, and Dan Ball from Facebook joining us. And so we're going to do a little round robin, and I'm going to ask questions of each one of them, but we're going to start by having each of them give us a brief introduction of who they are. So Suzanne, I'm going to start with you.
Sure. Hello, everybody. My name is Suzanne Montgomery, and I'm proud and humbled to serve as AT&T's Chief Accessibility Officer, where I lead a team that's responsible for providing tools and resources across the AT&T enterprise to help make our products and services for our customers and employees accessible and usable.
Thank you, Suzanne. Thanks for joining us. Dan, you want to go next?
Thank you. I'm Dan Ball with Facebook. Thanks for the opportunity to be here today. I work on the public policy team at Facebook supporting accessibility.
Yeah, thank you for coming. Karen?
Hi, good afternoon. I am the new president and CEO of Access Living, which is a disability advocacy and service organization in Chicago. Prior to coming to Access Living, I served for 14 years as the commissioner for the mayor's office for people with disabilities at the city of Chicago.
And Kyle?
Hi, thanks, Deborah. Hi, my name is Kyle Shackmet. I'm the Assistant Director of Digital Accessibility at Harvard. I lead our digital inclusion efforts and our central IT accessibility team, and regularly partner with peers of mine through EDUCAUSE, an industry association. I co-lead a group of peers that do this work of digital accessibility at their institutions.
So welcome to these great panelists. And we're going to start, I'm going to ask a question of each one, and we're going to move around just so that we do make sure that we stick to our timeline. So Suzanne, we're going to start with you. Are there ways in which companies in developed countries can leverage their success in implementing digital accessibility and assist companies trying to address digital accessibility in less developed nations?
A great question. Thank you, Deborah, and thank you to the participant who submitted the question. So events like this, where we come together with leaders from around the world, talking about these topics and sharing best practices, is the start, but it's only the start. Companies need to be vocal about the work that they've done, how they've accomplished it, be transparent about failures and what didn't work, so other companies don't make those same errors and learn from the opportunities and successes that companies have had. As we've expanded internationally in our consumer business, one of the big things that we've learned is the importance of local culture and embracing local culture. So making sure as you're either doing it for accessibility and usability inclusion for yourself, or providing guidance to somebody else, that you start with embracing the local culture and the language and the experiences of the people locally. That is the foundation of getting it right.
Ooh, good answer, good answer. Karen, let's go to you next. You've held several leadership positions, both in government with the city of Chicago and civil society with Access Living. In both of these roles, you have focused on creating more inclusive, smart communities. Mm-hmm. And the technology and data are key to those smart communities, but what role do the community of people with disabilities have in these efforts?
Thank you, Deborah. Yeah, people with disabilities have an absolutely essential role in ensuring that our communities are digitally inclusive and accessible, and both serving in city government and now in a nonprofit role, I've really seen how essential it is for our community to be involved. You know, Smart cities are really cities that use data and technology to solve problems and help a city run more efficiently and cost effectively. I think a smart city can really bring new opportunities for all of their residents, but in particular, people with disabilities, to both live in the city, navigate about the city, and work in the city. And because we're one of the fastest growing segments of our city's population, we're a community that anyone can join. As was mentioned, we're about 15% of the population. We really can't be smart unless we're fully accessible. And so when I was working in government, I saw firsthand really the end result of when a city deploys technologies like hardware, software, new internal websites, tools, apps, electronic information kiosks, and much, much more that were not accessible simply because they had not engaged the advice and input of people with disabilities in the planning, the design, and the testing of those products. So it's absolutely critical if you're going to have a truly smart city that's inclusive of everyone.
Well said. And often we are, not invited to the table, and representation really matters, as we know. So Kyle, let's turn to you. And Caroline, at any time, we always want you feel free to let me know. Yeah, if you want to come in. Kyle, what role does education and research play in creating, building, maintaining smart communities?
Great question, Deborah. As we've heard a few times, education and education institutions, like we reflect and mirror the societies that we live in, right? And in many ways, particularly higher education, right? We are mini communities ourselves. And, we have thousands of higher ed institutions, just speaking for the United States, ranging from really small liberal arts colleges to community colleges to large research universities, right? So there's a wide variety, but think about it in the ways that we have our kind of primary internal constituencies. So of course, students are our big, we are here to serve students and teach students and be an inclusive and welcoming experience for them. But we also train, students are coming to learn how to train, to participate in the workforce, to be contributing members of society, and in some cases become those teachers and researchers, right? So we have faculty members that are living up to the teaching and research missions of our university. And then of course, staff who our institutions would not run without, right? All the many different roles and functions. And so part of our role as education communities is kind of internal looking and then disseminating and communicating information with the world. And accessibility is just vitally important to all of those, both in having an inclusive representative experience of people with disabilities across our faculty, staff, and students, and then making sure that research and teaching, right, that we're communicating with the world, if it stays within education communities, we failed. We've got to make sure it's open to everybody in the world.
Ooh, well said. And I do want to, I forgot to mention this, but the questions that I'm asking are questions that came from you, from the audience, that if you did the G3ICT survey, because we wanted to make sure that this was as interactive as possible. So great question, Kyle. And we were very deliberate about making sure, because if you're going to have a smart community, you have to bring in all the stakeholders. That's why we brought in corporations, government, disability persons organization, which Karen's representing two different groups, our universities, and going right to another corporation. Dan, let me ask you a question. Are there any initiatives or efforts Facebook has to promote accessibility in the digital ecosystem more broadly? And Dan, you win the prize of being on mute.
Sadly, I've won that prize before. Thank you for the question. It's such an important topic. We absolutely want to drive innovation and accessibility that extends beyond Facebook. And that's why we're proud to be part of the Teach Access initiative. Teach Access brings industry, academia, and advocacy together to create models for teaching and training students on technology to create accessible experiences. The initiative includes, among others, Verizon, Microsoft, Google, Apple, Stanford, Cornell, and Georgia Tech. The challenge we identified is that accessibility is often not taught in computer science, design, and user experience degree programs. So Teach Access launched an online tutorial covering best practices for software design in order to advance accessibility training in higher education with the goal of ensuring future technologies are born accessible. We're honored that Teach Access has won a Heroes of Accessibility Award from Nobility and received an honorable mention from the FCC Chairman's Award for Advancements in Accessibility.
Yeah, we're very impressed with the work they're doing, because you've got to get it, once again, you got to get it at every single point. So we have to have it built into our education to make this really work. Suzanne, let's go back to you. What are the challenges AT&T has faced in raising accessibility as an important issue in a corporation as large and diverse as AT&T? And what do you believe have been some of your greatest accomplishments?
Great question, Deborah. Thank you. So every corporation will resonate with these challenges. We have competing priorities and we have things we have to do. So when we look at accessibility and the we have to do, we have a set of regulations and requirements from the Federal Communications Commission and similar bodies in other countries for our customers. And that led us for a period of time to lose sight of our employees and the things we needed to do to be deliberate about inclusion and usability and services for our employees. And we changed that a couple of years ago. So I think one of our greatest accomplishments was the launch and success of our deliberate accessibility and inclusion program. And I saw some questions come in through the Q&A in the last few minutes about inclusiveness of employees with disabilities, from career pathing to what exactly are companies doing. So I'll take just a minute to talk to you about what we did. We started with interviewing employees with disabilities, and we interviewed supervisors of employees with disabilities, and we interviewed employees who are champions. We partnered with our employee resource group, and we developed a list of prioritized goals that we've been working on, and it addresses everything from live captioning. We've had some technical issues this morning, well, morning for me, afternoon and evening for others. We addressed career pathing opportunities. We addressed our self-ID program, saw a huge increase in people feeling comfortable raising their hand and saying, I count, I matter at AT&T. So making sure, from the challenge, it's making our voice loud enough and strong enough to become a top priority, and then being deliberate in goal setting and holding everyone and myself accountable to meeting those goals and achieving those goals. And Deborah, you're on mute now.
I joined Dan. Okay. I'm trying to turn it off because, yeah, just keeping it quiet. But I do want to point out that we're not going to have time to do all of the questions, but Enabling it really wants to make sure that it captures your questions. So if you have questions and we don't get to it, they're gonna get them to us so we can answer them and send them back to everybody. So please just keep putting your questions in, even if we don't get to it, we will after the conference. So Karen, let me ask you another question. It's often said that technology is the great equalizer. How do you think about this when it relates to people with disabilities? And has COVID-19 forced you to rethink any of the way that you're doing business as the world is relying more heavily on technology?
Absolutely. COVID-19 has both exposed the disparities that people with disabilities have long faced, but I think also the opportunities, some of which were discussed earlier today. Really, as our world shifts to remote everything right now, work, learning, play, social connectivity, that's now all based on technology. At Access Living, we're really seeing firsthand how people with disabilities are being left behind. Unfortunately, in Chicago, 35% of people with disabilities live at or below the poverty line. And so this presents a really big challenge for our community to access programs and services and healthcare and connectivity with family and friends. I think it's really important that when we talk about accessibility, we also pair those conversations with conversations about the digital divide. We have to talk about connectivity in every neighborhood, of which we don't reliably have that. I know in our city, we have to be talking about the linkage between poverty of people with disabilities and the ability to afford a device or a smartphone, a laptop. Just within our Chicago public school system this year, they distributed 150,000 laptops to families who had no devices. Many of our consumers cannot afford a smartphone or a device. And we have been able to secure a lot of COVID relief funds that we are using directly to purchase devices for individuals with disabilities that can't afford them. So, and then once you deploy those devices, there is a real need for digital literacy skills to ensure full participation of people with disabilities. As an example, when I was at the city, we literally served thousands of people that came to our office to get help with signing up for government services because they either didn't have a computer, they didn't have connectivity, or they didn't have the digital literacy skills or the comfort level to fill out an application online for government programs and services, which were largely moving online. Now that's exacerbated with like physical offices closing and government offices and nonprofits who might be available to help people. They're not there anymore to provide the support for people with disabilities. So I think until we start talking also about the digital divide that faces our community, technology can't yet be the great equalizer. I do think, just really quickly, there are two very important opportunities with COVID. I think the silver lining is what was talked about before, is just the heightened level of understanding now around the needs of accessible technology and the education that Zoom and Teams and all of the platforms we're working on now, you know, what they've done to educate people without disabilities about the importance of accessibility. And secondly, I think it's really kind of forced more of a conversation and thinking about people with disabilities being able to work from home as a reasonable accommodation, which our community, unfortunately, as you know, Deborah, has long had to fight for. And I'm hoping that as we enter into the recovery phases of COVID, we will see this as an opportunity for employment for people with disabilities.
I agree. And we've also seen in the United States, more Americans have come forward and self-identified for the first time ever as people with disabilities. And so it's, I think that, you know, really identifying who you are, especially in the States where, you know, it's difficult to ask an employee that, I think that's another benefit that's coming out of this as well. Kyle, let me ask you the next question. What improvements or innovations in mainstream technology like voice assistants and robots, AI-powered software would provide greater accessibility, improve education and employment opportunities for people with disabilities?
Hey, Deborah, this is Christopher and Kyle. Just if we could pause just 1 second and to let the interpreters catch up, the caption catch up between speakers.
Thank you. Okay. All right.
Kyle, go ahead.
Great, thanks. You mentioned what innovations could be useful. I think first, less of a technological innovation, but a process innovation of companies including people with disabilities in their development life cycles, right? We talk with so many vendors. In universities, we can't build all of our own technology, right? And so many vendors, it's clear that they haven't heard of accessibility or they're unfamiliar with what it is and what's really required. So having people with disabilities employed and included in design and development processes is absolutely critical to sustained improvements in excellence and accessibility. From a technological standpoint, I think certainly we've discussed today things like captions or automated AI-based captioning, right? Improvements or web-based creation tools that allow a faculty member to create a website and share their groundbreaking research that they want to share. But if making something accessible turns into a process that you have to be a secondary subject matter expert, it's not going to happen, right? These people are brilliant in what they do, and we need to make it easy for them to share and disseminate accessible information, especially things today where literally some of the research being done is life and death or critical to issues happening in society. And then finally, I think making sure that the programs we use for things like statistics and data visualization and those really critical STEM related schools, virtual laboratories, those tend to lag. And we're setting students with disabilities up to be perpetually behind if we don't include them in the same mainstream tools and processes that all of their peers are learning. If we say everybody's going to get this great immersive experience in learning statistics or doing now a remote chemistry lab or something, and the student with the disability can't participate in that because it's not accessible, we're only pushing people further behind when we have the opportunity to make sure it's inclusive and we're leveling the playing field. So I think continuing to make progress in those areas is really important.
Ooh, very powerful statements. Staying with the technology theme, Dan, what technologies are Facebook using? Are they using and leveraging that are promising to promote more accessibility at Facebook?
Okay, and I'm not on mute this time. Thank you, Deborah. I just want to say how much we agree with what Kyle just said about disability inclusion and hiring people with disabilities to help make products more accessible. And that's a priority for us here at Facebook. We want to provide and promote accessibility at scale. And to do this, we're using automated video captioning, automated alt text. Automated alt text, as this audience is likely aware, is data attached to an image that's typically used to describe the appearance and function of an image on a page, and face recognition. These are all resources powered by AI, and I'm happy to note that just today we've announced that we're enabling automated closed captioning on Facebook Live, Instagram, IGTV, and Workplace Live to support broadcasts in 6 languages. We built the AAT and face recognition accessibility tools to improve Facebook's services. Our hope is that this deployed product experience demonstrates the importance of AI for enabling better access to content across the web for persons with disabilities. We strongly believe AI is the future of improving additional interaction experiences at scale, whether they're visual in nature or otherwise. As AI systems get better at understanding images, video, audio, and other media, Facebook believes that more novel and robust innovations in accessibility will follow. Further,
I think we have lost Dan. This is Christopher. Deborah?
Yes, I was trying. Okay, Dan, are you back?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you cut off at least a sentence ago.
Well, my apologies. Just want to emphasize that AI is going to get better at recognizing images, video, audio, and other media. And AI is essential for ensuring that we build technology at a global scale that are inclusive.
Yeah, and we appreciate everything that Facebook is doing. We know that it's a challenge. Just social media is very, very interesting. I was just watching Social Dilemma on Netflix. So, you know, it's our life has changed a lot and we're all figuring out how to do it. But I know that we're a little over schedule. So I'm going to ask the last question to you, Dr. Caroline Casey, and then we'll turn it back over to Christopher. But, you know, what can we all do to better support you making sure that the corporations are at the table on a global level? I often talk about, I think it's great that a corporation's taking care of, you know, nationally, but if you're a global corporation, you need to be making sure that you're accessible and inclusive throughout your entire global footprint. And we don't often see that. We see it from a lot of the leaders that are speaking today, but so let me give you the last words, and also thank you to our panel member. Our panel members were amazing. So Caroline.
Well, of course, I'm going to say for those organizations that are not part of the Valuable 500, please come into this global community, which is here to help support all of us get there better, quicker, and faster. And let's reach that target of 500 so that we can reset the system together. But I think the most important thing is doing, and I want to refer to Suzanne in saying, is none of us are experts on all of this to get it right, because with innovation, we're going to fail. And I really hope that we create an environment and a culture where we at least try, because from trying, then we'll fail, and then we will find ways through. So I think it's trying to create cultures and spaces for all of us to learn.
I agree. And is there a charge to join the Valuable 500?
Oh, for the Valuable 500, no. This is about the intention and commitment of a brand and a leader. This is nothing to do with money. This is not a tick box pledge. This is simply joining as first of its kind global community in the world. And together from 2021, we will go on a transformational program. So no, it's very exciting.
And we support global, national, and local. So thank you so much to this amazing panel, Suzanne, Karen, Kyle, and Dan, and thank you, Caroline. And we really appreciate everything that G3ICT and Enabling and IAAP is doing, and EJ Krause as well. So back over to you, Christopher.
Thank you, Deborah. Thank you, everyone. This is Christopher. We had a 5-minute break set, but because of the technical issues that we faced with captioning, which we do apologize for, we are going to take a 3-minute break. And next is going to be two amazing speakers. We've got Steve Tyler, Director of Accessible Technology at Linda Cypher, and also Peter Korn, Director of Accessibility at Amazon Lab 126. So again, 3 minutes, and come back and grab your coffee, grab your tea, and come on back.
And Christopher, Susie had made a comment that if you're not speaking, if you go off video, it allows the screen size to be better for the interpreter. So
that's correct, Deborah. This is Christopher. Yeah, if you could turn your camera off if you're not speaking. If you're on the panel, discussion panel, please keep it on. But if you're not, if you could turn it off, that would be great. Except for the ASL interpreters, they will keep it on. All right, y'all. See you in 3 minutes.
Thank you for your patience this morning as we work through our technology challenges. We have a few minutes break here. We're sharing slides. This slide is displaying our accessibility team from past Enabling conferences. We're listening to music from an accessibility professional, Homer Gaines. If you use Twitter, you can join us today by using the hashtags emenabling20 and emenabling summit. You can find the Enabling Virtual Leadership Briefing 2020 sponsors on our wiki, where you can learn more about each of these amazing organizations that are making accessibility possible around the globe. The link to the wiki is posted in chat. You can find Homer Gaines music on Amazon, Spotify, iTunes, and YouTube Music. Homer Gaines, I'll post a link in the chat when we return. Thank you to our Enabling Virtual Summit sponsor for 2020, making it possible for us to bring this to you virtually. The music's brought to us from Homer Gaines. He is a IAAP Certified Professional in Accessibility Core Competencies, CPACC. He's a UX design lead here in Atlanta, Georgia. Thank you to G3ICT and EJ Krause for organizing this year's summit. This slide features images of the G3ICT, IAAP, and EJ Krause virtual production team. I'm going to turn the show back over to Dr. Christopher Lee. Thank you for joining us during this break. I hope you had just a moment to catch your breath and perhaps grab a cup of tea or glass of water.
Okay, welcome back. This is Christopher Lee. We have our next group of presentations. We're going to start off with a lightning talk from Peter Korn, and then we're going to go into a discussion session. I'm going to bring on Steve Tyler. Steve, you have the floor.
Hi, everybody. And thanks, Chris. Thanks to all. Those of you who know me will know that part of me hates this kind of stuff, in the sense that part of my role is to keep my mouth shut and let other people talk. Part of my role is to keep people on track. Well, that's a bit rubbish for a start, because, I barely can keep myself on track. And partly is to extract as much stuff out of these sessions as we possibly can to take forward. And I want to just couch this setup. Let me just tell you who we've got, and then and how we want to play it. First up will be Peter, and I'll introduce him properly in a second, from Amazon, and he's going to give us a few minutes on what he thinks the game-changing technologies are at the moment in 2020 and around accessibility. And then he will join the wider panel that I will attempt to moderate and question. And that panel includes Larry Goldberg. Larry is now part of Verizon Media and has done lots of things in the past around accessibility. Megan Lawrence. Megan has, she works for Microsoft. She also has the word evangelist in her title. That's always good, I like to feel. And Rachel Sanford Nemeth, and she's part of the CTA, Consumer Technology Association, part of Regulatory Affairs. They are examples of people who, and only a surprisingly small number of us, I should say, around the world, who engage in this area. And I'd like to just give you some stuff to think about, and then launch off with Peter. Those of you who know me know that I think technology is a great leveler. I think it's a fantastic time to be alive if you have a disability from a technological point of view. But I've also learned that culturally, we're not keeping up. We're not keeping up with training and advocacy. We're not keeping up with cultures of companies. We're not keeping up in getting hold of the technology. We've still got this massive divide between the less connected world and the more connected world. And even in the more connected world, there are despicable situations around employment rates. You know, we've got some figures still that indicate that, so if I stick to the UK for the moment, because they're the ones that I know best, in the UK, some people argue that we're a really astonishingly strong economy, and we know a thing or two about development and so on. Apparently, we still, though, think it's okay that where, you know, 73% of people that lose their jobs involuntarily do so as a result of an acquired, as a result of an acquired disability or long-term health condition. We still have a situation where employers, and those we have interviewed in the past who know who we are and they know where this is going, still feel perfectly able to say, about 23% of them still feel able to say, under no circumstances would I want somebody with a disability on my team. So we've got some work to do. And we've also got some work to do in the technology arena with some very notable exceptions, some of whom are around this table. You know, Amazon have made massive strides in connectivity, and Google too. We've got examples here that Larry has worked on, and in fact, one of the big messages for me coming through is collaboration is the key. But I would encourage my panelists after Peter to, as far as possible, you know, come up with ideas, discussion points that will break a few eggs, because that's how we've done it in the past. And we need a bit more, in my view, revolution. More to the point, as an audience, think about the questions and send those in. We'll collect them up on the wiki. And if you've got any questions that we don't cover, we'll also collect those up. We want to know about what you see as big breakthroughs over the next few years. We want to know where you think we should be putting most effort. What are the key corporate strategies we should be thinking about that secure accessibility and change the culture? What about the global interests of enabling and the disability community generally? How do we bring costs down and make technology more available? And finally, what would be your biggest single priority? If you had to pick one, what would you want us all to do? Peter, the floor is yours. You have 7 minutes, and I will be a complete horrific, whatever it is, and stop you after 7 minutes.
Very good. Well, hopefully we are now sharing my screen, and in 7 minutes, I'm going to talk about 7 game-changing accessibility innovations. But before we get to that, I really want to start with why we need to change the game. You know, when we think about people with disabilities, you go shopping from a wheelchair and half of store shelves are out of reach. If you have a vision impairment, it's difficult to see what aisle you're on, to find the things you want to shop for. Every can looks the same if you're blind. As we move to telecommunications and the access to media, poor vision can make it difficult to watch a television. Something like retinitis pigmentosa or glaucoma and tunnel vision, even still more difficult. Books are incredibly important, and there's a lot of large print books, but they're often not large enough. And that assumes that you have hands to turn pages in the first place. So the first innovation I'd like to talk about is the rise of built-in accessibility. And this really was kicked off by things like the Americans with Disabilities Act, by the CVAA, the Telecom Act. We are seeing, for example, you won't find an ATM machine in this country that doesn't have a headphone jack, that doesn't have tactily discernible buttons, that doesn't have a braille decal explaining how to use it. And that's even spilled over to things like delivery lockers. Here we have a photo of an Amazon delivery locker, and every Delivery Locker has a headphone jack and tactile discernible buttons and a braille decal explaining how to use it. When we move to other consumer electronics, every iPad, every Android tablet, every Fire tablet, all have a rich set of accessibility features built in at no added cost. Pictured here is a Fire 7 tablet at $49.99, and it includes a very featureful screen reader with full and rich braille support. We see this same built-in access coming to streaming media players, Apple TV, Android TV, Roku, Fire TV, as well as the physical TVs, smart TVs from Samsung and TCL, and Fire TV Edition smart TVs from Toshiba and Insignia, all with a rich set of access features built in. Pictured here is a Toshiba 55-inch smart TV, 4K Ultra HD video, $379.99 with all of these features built in, whether it's an innovative text banner feature for people with glaucoma or retinitis pigmentosa, which you might also use at the same time as magnification. We're even now seeing these technologies getting built into cars. Pictured here is a screen grab from a TV article that Fire TV is going to be in the back of BMW and Fiat Chrysler cars in the 2021 model year. The second innovation I want to talk about is content accessibility. This began with Julia Child's The French Chef being broadcast from WGBH TV with captions burned in. And then, of course, FCC requirements in this country for the minimum number of hours of broadcast TV having captions expanded with the CVAA. Pictured here is a screen grab of the Audio Description Project website at the American Council of the Blind, listing over 4,350 titles with audio descriptions there available to everyone. Prime Video has over 1,800 titles. There are over 12 million accessible Kindle ebooks. Access to content is a huge innovation. The third innovation is the rise of speech interfaces. These are things like Siri and Google Assistant, and of course, Alexa. And these assistants are available at highly affordable prices, $39.99 for an Echo Dot, $89.99 for one of these smart speakers with a built-in screen. And these smart speakers are accessible not just to people with vision impairments or motor impairments, but they have built-in access features like captioning and tap to Alexa, where you can just touch on the screen to say with your finger any utterance that you might use with speech. And these voice assistants are coming now to wearable devices. Siri is available in Apple headphones, in Google headphones, in Echo Buds from Amazon, but also in glasses like the Echo Loop, even rings like the Echo Loop, I should say, is the Ring. Echo Frames is the glasses. And these voice assistants are actually also becoming ambient audio detectors. So you have features like the ability to recognize a smoke alarm going off or the sound of breaking glass of somebody entering your home, which could then be notifying you if you are deaf or hard of hearing. The fourth innovation is smart homes. We are seeing the ability to control lights and entertainment systems, accessible appliances that were never accessible before, access to doors with automated door openers, all tied into these voice assistants. The fifth innovation is the rise of computer vision, systems like Microsoft Seeing AI and Android Lookout and Amazon's Show and Tell, where computer vision can recognize things in your environment or things that you hold up and will tell you what they are. A massive, massive innovation. And I think we're just at the beginning of computer vision's potential. The sixth innovation is we're really starting to see now a certain amount of friendly competition among the larger technology companies, with over 1 billion people on the planet having a disability. We, all of them, Amazon, Apple, Google, would like them to be our customers. Well, if we want them to be our customers, we need to earn their business. We need to compete for that business. And so we see now the rise of friendly competition. Voice view versus talkback versus voiceover. iPad versus Android tablet or Fire tablet. Apple TV, Android TV, Fire TV. Siri, Google Assistant, Alexa. iTunes, Netflix, Prime Video for accessible video, iBooks and Kindle. The final innovation I want to talk about is the rise of the ADA and CVAA generation. These are now people who were born after the ADA, who are coming of age 10 years now into the CVAA, who are expecting accessibility. Pictured here is a 9-year-old who came up to our table at the National Federation of the Blind convention, and he would walk up, Google, Siri, Alexa, what time is it? And then he found the remote for our Fire TV and used voice view to navigate to Netflix, turn on audio description, and watch Cars 3, because that's what the booth was here for. It was his own personal entertainment system. Later that same day, a 5-year-old came up dragging his mom to our booth. Mommy, I need a Fire tablet. And she said to him, well, how would you use it? And he then went on to demonstrate. This new generation will push us to build the next set of game-changing innovations that we talk about and see for the next decade or so. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter. As always, really insightful. One of the things that that we held some time ago at M-Enabling, and I remember the early days, I say early days, 4 or 5 years ago maybe, where we had long discussions with the Consumer Association and many others, and the challenges that connectivity and smart home development were posing to consumers and to retailers. People would go in expecting that they could buy, you know, the next piece of technology they'd invested in a couple of years ago, and of course the answer would be, no, we've all moved on, or that's been discontinued. So I'm really glad that that's beginning to change, at least. Okay, so I've got some quick fire questions for my panelists, including Peter. So in this order, Larry, then Megan, then Rachel. If you don't mind, a couple of minutes each on what you see as the big breakthroughs in technology over the next 2 or 3, 5 years. And linked to that, where do you think we, as an accessibility community, pressure groups, people working in the field, where should we be putting most energy to make sure that we get accessibility right? Larry, will you start?
I sure will, Steve. Thank you for inviting me and for enabling to have us here. You know, for many of us, I think we are true believers in technology. We just love technology, but the real big changes are in awareness. Like Caroline, I very much enjoy being a real disruptor. And I think a lot of what a lot of us have been able to accomplish is applying what exists out in the world and using our tools to make everything more accessible. Raising awareness among developers and designers, among corporations, is going to have more effect than all the other tech we've been talking about today. One of the opportunities we had recently in our XR Access project with Cornell Tech was the notion that the gap between when a technology becomes popular and when it becomes accessible needs to shrink. You think about movies in theaters. It was 100 years before you could go into a movie theater and get captioning and description. On television, it was 70 years between the time TV became popular and when it became accessible. And then we moved to DVDs and the web, and that time period is shrinking more and more. So when we had the opportunity to actually address the question of virtual reality and immersive reality, we realized that though this has been the next big thing for so many years, it wasn't mainstream yet. And can we get in now, raise awareness, apply our technologies so that when it does go mainstream, we will have embedded, born accessibility right in the systems, the platforms, the standards. So I think where we're very hopeful and where we can see the next big things coming is making sure that we can shift left, go right to the birth of technologies and make sure that they're born accessible.
Born accessible. I love that. And you know, and Peter alluded to this previously as an example of things that have moved really quickly. You know, look at the traditional publishing community. Look at its distribution mechanism that has been around for 200, nearly 300 years. And that over a very short period of time has been wiped away. And actually, we were right on the cutting edge of that around bringing accessibility, and still working on that, of course. And all of us around this table have had one way or another something to do with the regulation, the standards, the delivery of those materials, etc. Megan?
Yes, lovely to be here today. So, I really am thinking hard about the spectrum of disability. And so if we look at some of the current statistics, the Center for Disease Control reports out every month on, how people are experiencing mental health conditions and symptoms. So in January 2019, 8% of the American population, and I know these are American statistics, so forgive me, but I want to give you just a little bit of insight into what we're seeing. These are mirrored worldwide. 8% of the American population reported having symptoms of a generalized anxiety disorder. That same pulse, household pulse, came out last month, and it was 36.5% of the American population that reported having symptoms of an anxiety disorder. So when I think about where we have work to do and innovation opportunity is really within the mental health community. It is the #1 disability in the world today, and about 83% of us will have a diagnosable mental health condition at some point in our life. Now that might be something permanent. I myself have an anxiety disorder as well as fibromyalgia, which is a chronic pain disease. Or it might be something more temporary where we see people, because of the working from home, because of the pandemic, because of the justice movement, criminal justice movement that we see, are experiencing mental health symptoms and new diagnoses are coming through, specifically within our Black communities, our Black disability communities, and the intersectionality of race and PTS or PTSD. So as I think about where we have room to grow, I love the concept of born accessible. So how do we begin to create technology that is empathetic? Where's my wellness advocate in my pocket? How do I quiet things down so that I am not as distracted as we think about collaboration within Teams, within Zoom, to make sure that it is something that is useful and not triggering. But on the back of that, I think we have to be honest with ourselves about data. Many of the technologies will be driven using AI, but we still have a data gap in what we understand about the disability community. And I would double down on that when I say the mental health community at the intersectionality of Black and African American lives. Many of you on the phone I have known for years, and I have only in the last 3 spoken openly about my own mental health condition because of the own bias and stigma and fear that I had around what that would mean to my reputation. And so I think we have a lot of work to do as an accessibility community to raise awareness, reduce that bias, and think about how technology is going to be integrated for people with mental health conditions.
Fantastic, thank you very much. Means a lot to us, some of the stuff that you've said, especially at Leonard Cheshire, where we're doing a great deal of work on health and well-being and trying to figure our way through some of the technology innovations, what's good, what works, what may be, and what do we back? And more to the point, how do we change the culture that allows us to most efficiently adopt the benefits that these technologies are bringing? Rachel, for me, I guess like me, your role is cross-industry because of where you sit, I guess. So I imagine you've got kind of an interesting take on this, in that you see a lot of very different businesses, very different companies, organizations operating in different ways, but all tied together either because they're consumer organizations and certainly because they have to abide by regulation. Where would you go with this?
Yes, thank you, Steve. I would like to say that when we're looking at where we should have a focus in the next few years, I think it is important to look at accessibility from the perspective of awareness, innovation, and engagement. Awareness, both Larry and Megan spoke very well to this about looking at the need and demand for accessible technology. And one way that CTA has a fairly unique perspective on this is CTA as an organization does a lot of market research and looks at what consumers are currently using in the market and also what consumers potentially are looking for in the future. Also with when it comes to innovation, as Larry mentioned about having accessibility built in at the beginning of development of a product, that is something that we see every year at CES. We see that different companies are bringing new technologies, and whether they incorporate accessible elements to their products because of it being an accessibility feature or just a feature that they think consumers will really enjoy. I think that some of the products that Peter was talking about during his presentation would fall under that category. And also at CES every year, CTA hosts an accessibility contest in Eureka Park, which is the part of the CES show that is for startups. And so that is a way that CTA as an organization encourages accessibility to be built in to products right from the beginning. And finally, I would note that when it comes to engagement, specifically with policymakers and regulators, that is where organizations like CTA have the opportunity to take a leadership role through engaging with agencies such as the Federal Communications Commission and working with them on advisory boards such as the Disability Advisory Committee at the FCC, and having that conversation between industry and regulators is a very important part of this entire process.
Thank you very much. My next, I'm going to put the question out there first, so you've got time to think about it. You really only do have a minute each on this. You can either answer what key corporate strategies would you point to that have had most impact in your experience in delivering accessible product, and they can be key corporate strategies that you've adopted yourselves and utilized, or they can be ones that you would like to see, that you know from experience that they really work. By the way, this is a translation of quite a number of questions from the audience previously, which we encouraged prior to the panel session, which were variously put as, how do I get to where you guys are? because, and you can interpret that in several ways. One interpretation is, I want to help out. Another is, could I do better than what's being done right now? Kind of challenging. Peter, go for it.
So I had a conversation about this very topic not that long ago with Howard Rosenblum. I think in the IT space, we do a lot of t-shirt sizing, right? How much work is something, t-shirt size, small, medium. I think the first thing that we see with accessibility and how to do it well, if you don't know how to do something, the t-shirt size is always extra large. And I think that the first thing is you need people who understand how to make things accessible in the room to help companies understand what they need to do. Otherwise, the company is just going to say, oh, this is too big, this is too hard, we'll never get to it. The second thing is you need to ring fence your accessibility staff. You can't have accessibility be a project for a release. It has to be a program, right? And that program has to be staffed with people who you can't steal to do this other feature because that's a business priority, because there's always going to be some other business priority. From a business point of view, accessibility in the moment is never the most important thing unless you're getting sued. And if you're getting sued, you're not innovating, you're moving to a minimum bar. The final thing I think you need to do is you need to celebrate success. You need to take any story, anything where you've achieved something and celebrate it and tell the stories and build momentum and create a sense of pride and ownership in the company. You know, that I like being at Amazon, I like working on Fire TV because look at what we've done, right? I like being at Microsoft because look at Seeing AI, or look at the adaptive controller and the ad that we put out for the Super Bowl. Those celebrations of success are the positive flywheel to build more and more in the company over time.
Larry?
I'm finding myself in violent agreement with Peter. I'm shocked. In fact, he's right. I'm lately have been opposing the whole notion of accessibility champions, people who are patted on the back for doing something voluntarily that's a warm and fuzzy. In fact, it's their job. And we're focusing now on what we call operational excellence. You want to be good at your job, accessibility is just simply part of it. And at Verizon Media, I didn't start this. I'm only recently the head of accessibility there. It goes back to when we were Yahoo before Verizon acquired us. And we built in a tremendous amount of empathy towards the notion of accessible technology and serving our users with disability. But then we started asking our devs and designers, so, you know, what do you think? What do you need? And they would say to us, oh, I'm all in on accessibility. What am I supposed to do? I think it's a great concept. Can I have a checklist? And we realized the folks were there, they were with us, they were in the room, they were ready to go, but they needed the training, they needed the empowerment, and they needed to realize it was their job. It's how they're going to be judged. And we've been working pretty hard this year. We had a whole strategy on pushing this into the laps of the people who create our technologies, and they're not resisting. They just needed to know what to do. They needed the training and the tools. When I brought this up to our VP of engineering, he said to me, these aren't my words, oh yeah, of course, accessibility needs to be in the air we breathe and the water we drink. And it's like, whoa, that is now on every slide I ever present ever. And I'm quoting our VP of engineering. And that's where I say it's not about the tech, it's the knowledge and the awareness and empowering people to do their job right. So subject matter experts and not just champions.
Thank you very much. Megan, Microsoft have done a lot around changing culture by embedding as much knowledge and accessibility throughout the company. You know, we've seen quite a lot of evidence of that. What else would you say about this area?
Yeah, I mean, really building on what Peter and Larry have said, it can't be volunteer, it has to be a program. And I'm going to take that one more level, which is it has to be run like a business. And, you know, I will call myself out as a former academic. I love methodologies. I like measuring stuff. I like data. And so that's one of the reasons that we developed the Microsoft accessibility evolution model, which is how can we begin to evaluate accessibility at our company across the different businesses, so engineering, HR, sales, marketing, as Peter mentioned, some of the marketing that we've done around accessibility and disability inclusion, and begun to really hold ourselves accountable for that maturity. I will be the first to say that we have much more work to do, but if you don't have that benchmarking piece in place, it's really hard to know if I have, you know, done a good job, as Larry is saying, or I have more work to do, or how to grow and mature over time. So I think that maturity models and evolution models are critical to being able to run accessibility in a large corporation or a small corporation with confidence about how you've matured over time.
Rachel?
Thank you. So CTA's perspective on this is both as a company where diversity and inclusion is obviously a priority, and where we within CTA as an organization host various trainings and different initiatives to make sure that within our company we have a workspace and flow that accommodates all sorts of accessibility needs. But also as an industry organization, CTA can act as a convener of accessibility advocates and industry. Again, I'll point to something that we do at CES every year, which we bring accessibility leaders out to the show and facilitate conversations between them and the exhibitors to help build relationships and to help encourage the different companies who are exhibiting there to make accessibility a priority within their own companies and with their own products. And through these various roundtable conversations and meetings, a lot of good has happened over the last few years, and encouraging those relationships among the stakeholders can really help improve the priorities within different companies.
Thank you very much. I'm going to ask
Steve, we are out of time.
Yes.
I apologize for having to interrupt.
Yeah, not at all. I'm going to ask you to put out on chat the final question that I wanted to get to, which was, if you were rulers of the world, what would you do in the following year? You have one sentence to do it. What is it you would do that you would see as major priorities, either in the area that you work in, or if you could influence wherever you needed to? What would you bring about over the next year? Thank you, guys. We're out of time, and thanks very much for playing along.
You've got to answer it. Put it in the chat. Let's see, everyone. I just want to say thank you to everyone. We have one final thing before we're going to wrap up. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Peter. Thank you, all the panelists. We have a quick poll question that we're going to put out there, and then Excel's going to jump on in. The poll question has 3 options. You can choose as many options as you'd like. Choose a statement that you agree with, or statements. We can expect more breakthrough in accessibility innovations. As the first one, digital accessibility should be a much more higher priority for government and civil society. And the third one is, the future can be bright if all stakeholders join forces to promote inclusion. So we're going to give just 15 to 20 seconds. Rachel, you can push out the poll now. Everyone should be seeing the poll. And if you're not seeing the poll, those are the 3 options. And with that being said, we'll give the results in just a second. Excel, I'm going to turn it back to you.
Thank you, Christopher. And thank you to all our panelists and speakers today. I sensed personally tons of energy and focus, as much if not more than previous years at M-Enabling. So it's super encouraging. I think the presence of Caroline and some new speakers around the table was very powerful today. So we see that the agenda and the discussion about accessibility and inclusion is actually expanding to a much broader scale. That's perfectly in line with everything that we could hope for. So on the little poll that you saw, there were already those three dominant things that came out of the discussion today. It's clear that we are going to expect more breakthrough in innovation, and see how many of you agree with that. But we can see a lot of further progress and disruptions in the next few years. We also see that there is a huge sense of urgency to make digital accessibility a higher priority among governments and private sector organizations, civil society. And it is also very clear from all speakers we have heard today. I love the notion that friendly competition that Peter talked about and came back several times during our discussion. But that is really the demonstration that there is focus and energy in the IT industry and in the broader community in general to push the agenda forward. So if we can get the results of the poll, and we can maybe look at them. Yeah, so it looks like the future can be bright if all stakeholders join forces to promote inclusion, get 70%, and is the big winner, which is fantastic. So on our end, what we expect to do over the next few months is continue the discussions through our wiki, most likely having some other sessions in the early part of 2021. And we really want to make sure that this M-Enabling community keeps communicating and pushing the agenda forward, and we'll be in touch with all of you and our panelists today to see what we do next. So thank you so very much. Thank you for joining. It's a wonderful opportunity to catch up with you all.
Thank you very much. Thank you to our sponsors, obviously our speakers. We want to thank the team, EJ Krause, M-Enabling, IWP, the full group, really great support. We definitely want to thank our accessibility team. We do apologize that there was a server that went down at the very beginning with our captioning. That was a shame, but we got back up on our feet, and we definitely want to make sure that we point you to our wiki. All the questions, as we mentioned earlier, will be posted there. We will be going out to our presenters, who I know are very busy, but we'll be trying to get answers to some of those questions if we can't answer them. So again, thank you, and we appreciate you participating in the first M-Enabling Virtual Summit. Take care.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks. Great job. Great job.